Morning, everyone. My name is Palmer McIntyre. I'm with Piedmont Land Conservancy and Piedmont Legacy Trails, and welcome to the 2022 Piedmont Legacy Trails Summit, part three of 4. We have a great session today. Hope y'all will get a lot out of it. So, innovative strategies for funding and the future. So we've got 2 fantastic speakers today with us, Chris Snow from Wake County and Mitchell Silver, our keynote speaker. And if you haven't heard Mitchell Silver speak before, you are going to really love hearing from him today. So also want to invite you to join us again next Friday for our last installment of this year's summit. We'll be looking at a couple of case studies. We're going to go over to Princeville, North Carolina with Mary Alice Hawley with the Conservation Trust for North Carolina to learn about a community partnership and trail project there. And then we'll hear from Spencer Finch with Alta about Philadelphia's circuit trails, which they call 100 miles a happy. So we are looking forward to hearing how they have pulled off a really unique and tremendous network of greenways in the Philadelphia area. We are grateful to our sponsors for the summit: American Planning Association North Carolina chapter, McAdams, Alta, the local government federal credit union, and Destination by Design. We're truly grateful that they've helped make all this possible. One quick note here, if everyone can stay on mute and use the chat box for your questions. So we'll have time for questions after both presentations. And we usually hang on after the end of the conference as well for some other additional conversations around the coffee table. We'll call it the virtual coffee table. We're recording this session, so these will be up on our website very soon, and we'll send it to registrants probably next week. And for those of you looking for credits, we do have planning credits, and we also have an opportunity, I think, for the other credits, the engineering credits as well. We're working with Kelly Larkins on that. So before we get started with our presentations, we do have a very special award. So we give out Piedmont Legacy Trail Legacy Awards. We didn't do this for the past couple of years for the pandemic, so we're kind of making up for lost time, and we've been doing one each week. We did miss last week, so next week we're going to have 2, but this week we have a very special award to give to Mark Gatehouse. Mark Gatehouse is here in Guilford County, and he has been an incredible trails volunteer in our region since he landed here back in 1993. So we're giving this award to him for his outstanding commitment and contributions to creating trails in our region. So he helped build the Greensboro Fat Tire Society, which is now the Piedmont Fat Tire Society, which is one of the strongest volunteer trail organizations in our region. They've done incredible work, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they've accomplished in a little bit. So Mark's experience with trails goes way back to building cross-country ski trails back in the 1970s in DuPage County, Illinois, at some of their forest preserves. But he didn't really discover biking, because that's really what his thing is, what he's known for, but he didn't discover biking until much later. He received an early birthday present of a bike from his wife back in around 1990, and he immediately was hooked and has since become a really big biker and mountain biker. So Mark believes that trails are the venue to enable people to really understand and connect to the natural world and contribute to their health and well-being. So he's very passionate about trails. And after 27 years of building trails here in our region, he says the most gratifying part is seeing the next generation of people out on trails. So some of the folks he worked with early on are now bringing their kids out on the trails. And he's really seen this, especially these last 2 years with the pandemic, and how trails have been the saving grace for so many people to get through these challenging times. And he never rides or walks on a trail without feeling deep gratitude and deep respect for the hands and the efforts that went into creating that opportunity to connect with nature. But the thing about Mark is that he's not just a trails volunteer. He really digs in and gets the whole system. He really participates and understands that it's not just about building trail, but it's about connecting systems and connecting trails. So as someone who once lived in one of the fastest growing counties in the country, he has really seen how land use change can impact a landscape. So when he speaks about trails, he really speaks about three legs of advocacy for trails. So first, you want to preserve your open space corridors and special natural areas. And then you want to make sure that trails connect in an environmentally responsible way to provide enjoyment, but also protect the resource. And then the third leg, and probably the most important leg, is urban planning. Integrating those open spaces into developing areas and make sure you consider all the opportunities for trails. So to this end, he has always been a tremendously active participant in planning processes. He's been on the Bike Ped Advisory Board for a number of years. He's participated in all kinds of land use planning efforts. And so none of this is easy. I mean, it's one thing to go out and work on a trail work day one day, but all of this work takes a tremendous amount of planning and effort. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you just keep at it. And that's what he does so well. So here you can see him. I mean, trail building is about a lot of pre-planning. And you can see that all these groups do that on a regular basis. And the Piedmont Fat Tire Society, just to say that they have done such a tremendous contribution in this region, built 34 miles of trails. They're working on 2.5 more miles right now that should be ready before the end of the year. They maintain 50 miles of trails in our region. And really, Greensboro Triad area is known for mountain biking. And a lot of that credit goes to what the Piedmont Fat Tire Society has done. They get a lot of credit for that reputation. And they are not afraid to get out there and do the hard work that needs to be done to build high quality, high class mountain bike facilities. And also another thing that Mark has done so well, and he believes in, is mentoring the next generation of young outdoor leaders. So he has worked with several Eagle Scouts on ambitious projects, very long boardwalks, other trail infrastructure and facilities. And he really enjoys that part of his work and working with young people. And he just loves getting people out on trails of all ages, abilities, and enjoying nature and getting healthier too. So congratulations, Mark. We are grateful to everything you've done contributing to trails in our region. Next time I see you, I'm going to give you our handcrafted hiking stick as our award. And I know you usually bike, but I know you like to hike too on occasion. And I just invite you to say a word or two before our presentations.
Thank you so much, Palmer. It's a great award, great honor to be presented this award. Really heartwarming just listening you recap our conversation from the other day and talking about the 26 years of volunteer efforts and everything that the Fat Tire Society has accomplished. Like you said, I first became involved in building trails here in Greensboro because I've been so blessed having lived in different areas with trails near me. And I personally knew how valuable trails were. And I felt strongly that our community needed to be able to have those outdoor experiences for everyone. And, luckily I found hundreds of like-minded individuals who have been willing to work really hard to make that dream a reality. And as you mentioned, if there's one thing that's been extremely clear in the past 2 years of COVID, it's just how essential trails are to the health and well-being of our communities. The opportunity for people to leave behind the stress of Zoom meetings and work pressures and to decompress, it's never been more important than it has been recently. And I think it's also been a bit of a blessing too, because it's broaden the awareness of trails and nature to community leaders and general public who maybe previously hadn't spent a lot of time in the woods. And as you mentioned earlier, I know everyone involved in the summit knows how much time spent immersed in nature restores that sense of calm and well-being. And, my trail experiences always enrich my soul. Trying to provide those experiences to larger and more inclusive communities is critical. There have been studies that show if a trail's within 10 minutes of someone's house, they're much more likely to exercise and get those health and well-being benefits. And as you mentioned, I think our responsibility is to get the youth out into nature, because the well-being of our planet depends on the next generation learning important lessons of responsibility and leadership and conservation. So when we advocate for preserving open spaces and building trails, we're providing opportunities for healthier ecosystems and healthier human beings. And trails provide a path for people to appreciate nature, wonder, and that miracle of our environment. And when people do that, they're much more passionate to protect our environment. I'm an ardent believer that what we experience in nature, we value, and what we value, we protect. And the most rewarding part of all the involvement were so many of those pictures you showed with all the different volunteers who, when I ask them why they're willing to come out, they go, trails have meant so much to me, I love to pay it forward. And I'm just really grateful that North Carolina's new vision of being a great trail state is coming to be. And I look forward to being a small part of helping make that dream a reality. And thank you again so much for this Legacy Trail Award. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, it's well deserved. And thank you. And to all your friends and partners with the Piedmont Fat Tire Society. Well, now I'll turn it over to Brianna, who will introduce our first speaker.
Yeah, Mark, I just want to say amen to everything you just said, and congratulations, it's very well deserved. So I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Chris Snow. Chris is the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space for Wake County, and their system comprises 11 very popular parks and trails in the Raleigh area. In addition to its own parks and preserves, the county is actively partnering with local municipalities and in the areas of community use and schools and greenways. And as the director, Chris is responsible for all aspects of park operation and management, as well as open space acquisition. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Recreation Resource Administration and a Master's in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management from NC State. And he began his professional career as a park ranger with the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation at Cliffs of the New State Park. He previously held positions at the county's Lake Crabtree County Park and Blue Jay Point County Park before assuming the role of Division Director in 2006. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Very excited to be here. It's only taken me 3 years to get here. I think Palmer first asked me back in 2019. So I'm going to share my screen. And Brianna, if you could give me a thumbs up that you can see.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. So again, Chris Snow, Director of Wake County Parks, Recreation, Open Space. Very excited to be here. I see some familiar faces on the screen, so always good to talk to friends about what we do here. As I mentioned, been trying to get here since 2019 when Palmer first asked me to do this, and it seems like first one thing and then another and then a big something. COVID got in the way, but really glad to be here. Just want to talk to you just a little bit about our program, what we do here in Wake County, how we do it with regard to our funding assistance to the municipalities with parks and greenways. And so just gonna kind of jump right in. And why can I not advance my slide, Brittany? Oh, there we go. I'm good.
Looks good.
So Wake County Parks, Recreation, Open Space really got going back in the mid-70s. We became a division within Wake County government without any parks. We had back then a grant and aid program where we were giving grants to local municipalities and nonprofits to get their recreational programs going. And so didn't have any parks when we got started building school parks, which Brianna mentioned. and then built our first county park in 1988 out at Lake Crabtree. We have 8 parks and 3 nature preserves right now, one of our parks is the American Tobacco Trail, which is a rail trail conversion, 6.5 miles, which most people talk about as a greenway, but we talk about it as a linear park. We don't, greenway is not really in our vernacular, which that's kind of the reason I named my presentation what I did, because we really don't have an active greenway program. We don't have a traditional greenway program. How about that? Our parks are natural resource based. They focus on outdoor recreation. We don't build a lot of community centers or gyms or those kinds of things. We let the landscape dictate the kinds of recreation that we provide. Last year, 1.6 million people visited our parks and preserves. I will echo a little bit of what Mark said about the pandemic and visitation and people wanting to be outside, needing to be outside, if you will. We saw a 27% increase from 29 to, from 19 to 20, and then from 20 to 21 saw the same increase. We're on pace to break 2 million people in our, or just at 2 million people in our parks this year. So we're really excited about that. Really busy, challenge for staff, but we're good there. So the other side of our house, we got the Parks and Recreation, is the open space side. We started this program back in 2000 with the goal of protecting and conserving some of the county's natural resources. And so this is land that can do lots of things: preserve natural resources, wildlife habitat, historical and cultural properties. We get into scenic landscapes and riparian corridors. Water quality is a big tenet of our program. And also to provide venues for outdoor recreation. So to date, we've acquired about 8,500 acres across the county. Most of that is fee simple, but there are a handful of conservation easements. We've done this alone just with our dollars, or we have partnered with the federal government, with state government, local municipalities, local nonprofits. So we're in it with everyone. The open space side of our house is actually how we got into greenways and started working on our first trail project, which was the Neuse River Greenway with the city of Raleigh. So most folks know the Neuse River flows out of Wake into Johnson County on its way to the coast, and it had been an open space corridor for us. We were acquiring 300 feet on both sides of the river to protect water quality primarily, and just had been doing this along the Neuse River and several other corridors across the county. The city wanted to build a greenway along the river and actually had sections of greenway already along the river, but they approached us because they wanted to be on some of our open space, which was awesome and a great partnership. The open space bonds that were passed, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, allowed for improvements on our open space properties. So we did a big improvement and kicked in $8.9 million on the city's Neuse River Greenway, kind of from Pool Road south to the county line. Some people thought the Neuse River Trail was a one and done. We're going to do this greenway, we're going to do this trail one time, and we're out. But most of you know, most of you who are on the call, work in the public sector, know you can't say yes to one person and no to somebody else. Usually you have to treat everybody fair and keep everything equal. So this led to a lot of partnerships across the county. We funded both trail design and trail construction, sometimes both. There are a couple of projects down in Apex, the purple dots you see, that got both design and construction money from us. And that's a good thing. And all of this work was done with bond funding and led to us doing some countywide greenway planning, which really helped us going forward. So just to talk real quick about how we partner, our program is pretty much municipal focused. That's who's building the greenways in our areas. We use an RFP process, a request for proposals. And we send that out to the municipalities and let them give us back projects that they are interested in us helping fund. Our typical partnership is 50-50. Of course, more favorable terms are smiled upon. If we can get a 60-40, that's all the better. Again, I mentioned earlier, we fund both design and construction. And when these come into us, they are reviewed by staff and we make recommendations to the county commissioners about which projects get funded. And then once we fund a project, we do a funding agreement with the municipality and we pay them on a reimbursement basis for work that is already done. So we actually go out and say, yep, your subbase is down, your asphalt's down, your bridge is in place, whatever it is that they're working on at that particular time. I mentioned the system-wide plan. This came out of our partnerships. Most of the time, early in our program, we were getting projects from municipalities that were really important to the municipality, but we as the county, looking broadly across the county, it was really hard to figure out where these individual greenways fit into a bigger system, trying to make that connectivity across the county. And so that was really important to us, and developing this plan back in 2017, it was updated in 2018, really gave us a framework to talk about regional connectivity across the county, which was really important to us. We involved the Greenway planners and the Parks and Rec folks from across the county in these meetings to develop this plan. It was led by Alta, one of your sponsors. And we had a great experience working for them, but basically looking at a connected system of trails all across the county, municipality to municipality, community to community. I'm sure in your areas, each municipality has its own plan, and here in Wake, a lot of times there is unincorporated Wake County property in between those municipalities. They're trying to grow together, but we serve as that bridge until they do. And so we wanted to make sure everything lined up. The other thing that was really important to this plan for us was not to focus just on recreation or just on transportation, but to bring in all the benefits of Greenway, focused on the big overarching quality of life, but public health, economic development, environmental stewardship. I mean, we have a lot of companies that move here because of the quality of life and the amenities that are in this area, as I'm sure you do as well. Talk a little bit about our bond funding. We have had pretty consistent bond funding for our projects over the last 20 years. Between 2000 and 2007, the voters approved $91 million in open space funding. And again, most of this money was used to acquire land across the county, but we can also improve property using this. Again, which got us into greenways, also got us into the nature preserve world, which we're doing a lot of right now. The bond language for the open space bonds there at the top really focused on those goals I spoke about earlier: water quality, wildlife habitat, scenic areas, really protecting the county's natural resources. In 2018, we passed a broader parks, greenways, recreation, and open space bond, $120 million. And that gave us dedicated money for greenways, for recreation, for park improvements, new parks. And that was great in that previously we were using the open space money for greenways. Now we had dedicated greenway money. The percentages that you see, those are our voter approval ratings. They are high. We had a county commissioner many years ago who said that if he could get 77% of the vote, he would run for king. And so these kind of amenities, parks, greenways, open space, are really important here, and the voters think they're important. The people who live here and work here think they're important, and they support them. So just really quick, look at our accomplishments in trails and greenways. We've invested about $18 million in 14 projects with 9 municipalities locally, and put almost 27 miles of trail on the ground. And I think that's pretty good for a program that greenways is not in my title, and I don't have a traditional greenway program. So we're very excited about that. We hear from the municipalities a lot that our dollars help them get other dollars. They leverage our money against other money. And it's always good to hear that they got another grant because they got a little bit from us. So. The keys to our success, I think, here locally, first of all, we have a very engaged community. People will let you know what they want. Sometimes you have to go out there and ask them. But I have never seen a recreational study done that places, safe places to walk and hike are not 1 or 2 at the top of the list. And so getting people outside in a safe manner is extremely, extremely important. I mentioned earlier the community support we had. You know, that was not 100%. That was 77 or 76 or whichever year you look at. So not everybody votes for these kinds of things, but the majority of people in this area think that these amenities are extremely, extremely important and fit into their quality of life. I mentioned we have had businesses move here, corporate headquarters move to the Raleigh-Durham area because of, I think, some of the recreational amenities we have, cultural amenities, just the things we have to do outside of work. Another key to our success is our elected leadership. We have had some really great county commissioners over the years, both Republican and Democrat, have supported the open space program, the greenway program. And so we have had some great leadership at the county management level, who they see the importance of these things and want to fund them, support our work. And then I'll throw in staff, but in that staff are all the consultants in this area. I mentioned Alta earlier. McAdams is one of your sponsors. We have worked with both of them frequently. But staff have to really give the community what they're looking for. We have to put something out there that's well thought out, that's planned, that's going to last, and be easy to maintain. So that's a really important thing for us. So this is like a collaborative, collective we. There are a lot of people involved in our success, from the top down and side to side. The last thing I'll mention really quickly, if you think about our countywide greenway plan, and then think about our region. Just recently, in the last couple of years, folks in this area, leaders in this area, have kicked off the Triangle Trails Initiative. And hats off to a couple of people, Chuck Flink and Commissioner Sig Hutchinson, for leadership on this and really getting this going. Really trying to mimic what the Charlotte area already had going on with the Thread Trail, and what you have going on in the Piedmont with the Piedmont Legacy Trail. Just, this is more than regional, especially when you talk about connectivity and transportation and alternative types of transportation, getting people off the roads in cars. And so if you think about this network that now it's spanning 14 counties from the Virginia line all the way down to the Cape Fear River, it's quite a network. A lot of people, a lot of these local governments have signed on to support this, and so it takes our little Wake County and expands that out to the region, and we're really excited about that. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions or Brittany, whatever you tell me to do.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of questions. So one of the first ones is, do you think that bond process can be replicated elsewhere, or was it specifically Wake County, everything coming together at the right time kind of thing?
I see successful bonds passed across the state and across the country. I also see bonds fail. I think the best thing you can do is get out there and educate your voters. As public staff and public sector staff, we can only educate. We can't advocate. We can't tell you which way to vote. We can just tell you the pluses and the minuses of voting. So I think the most important thing is to get out there and educate. I grew up in Mount Airy, North Carolina, up above Winston-Salem, very small town that has had a lot of success recently with greenways along the rivers. And I remember when they were first being put in, there were a lot of op-ed pieces. I cannot believe we are wasting money on trails. You know, people are out of work. People need this, people need that. We have bigger problems. But when I go home now and get out on these trails, there are so many people out there walking, strollers, biking, whatever. And I think it adds to Mount Airy's draw as a place to go and visit and stay and spend money, which helps the economy. And so the original question was, can it be replicated? I think it can be, maybe not on the scale we're doing, maybe not $120 million, maybe it's $5 million, maybe it's $1 million. But I really think you need to get to know your community and what their needs are, what their desires are.
Yeah, I have been out on the Granite City Greenway many times,
Woo-hoo!
and it's always so busy. I love it up there. It's really a beautiful trail. Your answer really segues into our next question, which is, did you specifically engage grassroots organizations and/or businesses in your successful bond campaigns? Who led the public engagement processes for these campaigns?
So a couple of different answers depending on which bonds you look at. Back at some of our very first open space bonds, we were working with the Trust for Public Land. That was back when they had a local office here in Raleigh. They were doing a lot of polling for us and helping us craft message and those kinds of things. We have hired outside consultants. The county has hired outside consultants. Typically, when we do a bond, Parks, Rec, and Open Space, Greenways are not the only thing on the bond. There's schools, there's Wake Tech, which is our community college here. There are other things. And so you're trying to craft a message around a broader set of goals and initiatives than just Parks and Rec. But again, a lot of the leadership came out of the county commissioners locally here. I'll go ahead and mention Commissioner Sick Hutchinson. Most folks know him, Mr. Green Jeans. He is a dynamo when it comes to this stuff. He's really passionate about it. And he was before he became a county commissioner. He was the chair of my Open Space and Parks Advisory Committee for 14 years. So he's just got a passion for this. And really, if you can find that passionate person, might be Mark, sounds like Mark, in your community that can really get people going and rally around the Greenway or rally around the woods or whatever you want to rally around. That's the key, is to finding somebody who's not afraid to speak up and speak out and make a phone call.
Yeah, I totally agree that leadership has so much to do with it. Let's see, another question that we have, what were the biggest challenges in the bond process, and were there any drawbacks to using that method for funding?
So the biggest drawback is trying to decide what you're going to focus on. So before the 2018 bond, they put us in a room and said, we want the universe of park projects for the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. So our list was like $500 million, you know, and we're just throwing, because you're not doing any serious planning. You're just, oh, and what about this? And what about that? And so you're having to stick a dollar figure to it, not snatched completely out of thin air, because you've got consultants involved and staff involved, project managers who are really knowledgeable about this. I've got 2 great ones, work right upstairs. But our original list was $500 million. So you have to truncate that down into something that not only the voters can support, but whatever governmental entity, for us, it's the county, what your debt modeling, debt capacity can hold. Because again, it's not just parks, it's schools, it's community health, it's homelessness, there's lots of things being funded. So the key, I guess the one, you know, kind of thing is you've really got to drill down, you've got to focus on what's really important. Brianna, I think there was a second part to that question, but I've forgotten what it is.
No, you answered it. It was really
Okay.
just what are the drawbacks?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question in the chat box from Gretchen Smith. She asks, what tools do you use to acquire land? For example, does the county use eminent domain like Raleigh does? Does the county have a UDO that requires land dedication by residential developers?
Excellent questions. The county does not condemn land for open space and parks. We never have, and actually forbid it. Well, I shouldn't say forbid it. We won't, if I'm writing a funding agreement with a municipality to do a greenway and they have to condemn land, they can't use my money for that condemnation. So we are pretty specific that we don't condemn for parks, greenways, and open space. Having said that, we go out and get appraisals. We pay fair market value. We do conservation easements and fee simple acquisitions. So we do both. Conservation easements allow you to stretch your dollar a lot further because you're only buying some land rights, not all. At the same time, you've got to make sure your conservation easement is written to do what you want to do. You know, if you're thinking sometime down the road, there's going to be a greenway here and you've got a conservation easement, but no right to public access, it really didn't meet your goals.
Right.
The second part of that was there anything in our UDO that asked developers to assist us?
Yes.
There was for about 12 years, up until 2008, with the economic downturn of 2008. The county commissioners did away with that. And so we no longer have that within the county. Several local municipalities have that, but we do not anymore.
And a follow-up question from Gretchen is, how are you coping with high land prices now?
Swallowing hard and paying the appraised price. We have seen a lot of increase in land costs. It goes right along with the housing market that we're in right now. It's crazy. We have missed deals, lost deals because we could not meet the seller's requests. You know, we're at appraised value and they're, you know, I'm making a number up, $500,000 above appraised value. And that's really, really hard for us. I will say that one of the things that's challenging for us here is when it happens the other way. And let's just say tax value on your farm is $1 million and we get it appraised and it appraises at 800,000. When you're talking to a landowner about purchasing that farm, they're like, oh, great. You know, when you want to tax me, it's worth $1 million, but when you want to buy it, it's worth $800,000. You know, how does that work? And we've been having a lot of discussion within the county staff. We have a real estate team upstairs that help us. And it's a tough situation to be in when you're talking to a landowner like that. So.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions and we still have a bit more time. So I'm going to keep rolling.
If you've got the time, I've got the talk. So.
Okay. This next one is from Sharon Nelson. So she says, I do some grant writing for a couple of organizations in Wake County where greenway adjacency has come up in RFPs. Am I correct that providing connectivity for low income / low resource neighborhoods has played a role in the RDU greenway development process?
RDU greenway, is she asking about a specific project or? The
Sharon, I'm
Triangle
going to invite
Bikeway?
you to unmute and clarify as needed.
Hey, sure. No, just generally speaking, has providing connectivity for those who may not have vehicles for transportation played a role in how and where you extend and develop greenways across Wake County?
That plays a role for us. It's actually in our criteria when we're reviewing a municipal plan.
That's what I
They
thought.
have to provide us, depending on how far along they are in the design process, they either have to provide us ArcGIS layer with the greenway, because we want to know where it is and who it's connecting. And we do look at census tracts and those that are underserved score higher for us. We also look at connecting residential to schools, residential to shopping, residential to employment centers. So that's also important to us and factors in our weighting. So we look at that. I'm sure the municipalities do as well. I cannot help but think that that's not high on their list.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so one of our questions might have you do some homework. Can we have a list of the several municipalities that have regulations in the UDO?
Sure. I think our planning department looked at that. I can get that.
Okay.
Brand, I'm gonna send it to you and you can send it to the requester.
Yeah, that's great. I will send that out. Okay, our next question is from Mark Gatehouse. He says, sometimes capital expense money is well funded, but the maintenance funding is less than necessary. Is the PGRO bond a source of GW staffing and maintenance? Any guidance or rule of thumb on maintenance costs?
First of all, bond money, no, it is geared specifically for bricks and mortar. So we don't buy staff and we don't buy operational supplies with it. We do, when we take a project to the board for approval to fund, and I'm not talking about a partnership with the municipality on a greenway because that's their responsibility, but let's say it's a park project that we're doing. When we go to the board, we've already estimated an operational cost and we tell the board, if you fund this to build it, then this also has to come with it hand in hand. That typically comes out of general fund within the county and is appropriated as a part of our budget process. So bond money doesn't cover that, but it has to be there. Or I, in good conscience, any other leader, if you can't maintain what you're getting ready to build, then you're wasting a lot of money. There was a second part to his question.
Yes, he said, any guidance or rule of thumb on maintenance costs?
We've been looking at that because we actually might be getting into the greenway business in a more traditional way. My life has been crazy the last couple of days because our commissioners are considering doing two key signature projects here locally. And there's a lot of unincorporated Wake County around these. And so we are the kind of the clear leader to do it, to run these projects and maintain them long-term. So I have just started dipping my toes into figuring out what greenway maintenance looks like, long-term trail maintenance looks like long-term. I don't have any rules of thumb right now. I'm still doing my research.
That's fair.
If anybody on the call's got any, I'm happy. I'm all ears.
Okay, we have one more question before I'll ask Mitchell to come on and speak. So
Okay.
the last question is from Palmer. To what extent are you using bond funds to leverage federal dollars for greenway construction?
So most of that is done on the municipal side. I mentioned earlier that a lot of times municipalities will use our funds to leverage either state or federal funds. The two projects that maybe in my future very soon, we're going to be going out and trying to leverage as much state and federal money as we can, because building these projects, one in particular, is going to be very, very expensive. And so we're going to try to do that. But right now it's all done on the municipal side, Palmer.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank y'all. Enjoyed it. Let me stop sharing.
That was a super informative presentation, and I'm really glad we had that much time to do questions. So I think everyone really benefited from that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, which is Mitchell Silver. Mitchell is the Principal and Vice President of Urban Planning for McAdams, which makes him responsible for providing advisory services in urban planning, land use, parks and public space planning, with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. He is an award-winning planner with more than 35 years of experience and is internationally recognized for his leadership and contributions to contemporary planning issues. He specializes in comprehensive planning, placemaking, and implementation strategies. For McAdams, Mitchell acts as a visionary thought leader and an advisor on current and future projects, and serves as an ambassador and leader for the company in regional and national organizations and events. Prior to joining McAdams, Mitchell served as the commissioner for the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, where he was overseeing the management, planning, and operations of nearly 30,000 acres of parkland, including parks, playgrounds, beaches, marinas, recreation centers, wilderness areas, and other assets. So we are so glad to have you joining us today. Welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you, Brianna, and good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and share my slides. So my topic this morning is really the future of parks, public space. I was supposed to come live from New York City, but my plans were all canceled. So I'm very delighted to be right here in North Carolina. My presentation is going to focus on New York City to talk about the future, but I don't want you to be distracted by New York City itself. I'll be sharing some very key principles where I see the trends that are occurring in parks and public space. And you'll see how these principles, these values are transferable into towns and the counties where all of you work. While I'll talk about parks and public space, I will be introducing some ideas about trails, which we were trying to do in New York City right before I left. Bike lanes are very popular in New York, and we were trying to elevate a lot more on the trails. I'm a runner and I train for marathons. So as I heard Chris talking, my two favorite destinations, because when you run marathons, you have to train up to 22 miles. So the Neuse River Trail as well as the Tobacco Trail are perfect locations because they're very long and wooded. I love the cover from the summer heat. So as was stated, served as Parks Commissioner for 7 years. Prior to that, I was Planning Director for Raleigh, North Carolina. And I wanted to make sure the public understood the importance of Parks and Recreation. So, I jokingly renamed us the Department of Fun, Health and Happiness. I believe every place should have a Department of Fun. And so we played that role. Little did I know, both during and before COVID, how appropriate that was. Completed over 850 projects, and many of those projects were done in underserved communities, prioritized equity, diversity, inclusion, and access, which I'll touch on in this presentation, and led with a culture of care for staff, for the parks, for our volunteers in particular, because to me, volunteers are giving up their time to love parks because they care. But now I transition, that was stated, to McAdams, and really love their tagline because I do believe in creating experiences. And now in this role, after serving in the public sector for most of my career, I was a consultant before, I'm now able to assist the firm in creating parks, planning greenways, both here in North Carolina, and across the country. So I always like to establish a context for kind of where we are with parks and public space. I want to go back to the 19th century, when parks was seen as parks and gardens, once they were known as in the UK and in Europe. Now, you didn't really stop and sit or picnic. You strolled through them and you observed the garden. They were meant to be observed, not really experienced in a way where you could have recreation. And then it all changed in the late 19th century, early 20th century, with for the first time, a profession called landscape architecture emerged. You're looking at Bethesda Terrace in Central Park, where Umstead shaped. This did not exist, but he started to create spaces, democratic spaces where people of all ages and races can come together for free and enjoy public space. And this movement took off across the country, where people now started creating these public gathering places, these parks, these trails where people can come and enjoy themselves. And then everyone knows the man, Robert Moses. There were two Robert Moseses. There were pre-war and post-war. Most people don't like the post-war Robert Moses. But the pre-war Robert Moses launched what was this recreational facilities era. That's where the parks and recreation came into being. There were people literally dying in rivers in New York City and children being hit by cars and carriages, horse carriages in the street, and decided to start to create these recreational assets. You're looking at a pool being built in the Bronx, the High Bridge, and playgrounds, just really to make the public safer. There were drownings, and once he started building these facilities, all the drownings went down because people jumped in the East River and other rivers to cool off. And then you had this environmental movement. After the Industrial Revolution and manufacturing started to die in this country in the late 90s, you had all this industrial land that was contaminated and unused, and many of it was close to the river. You're looking at the west side of Manhattan. This was industrial land. And what I love about this period is that we went in, we healed the land, we cleaned it up, and we gave it back to the public. In fact, this is the Hudson River Greenway, so probably the most popular greenway, I believe, in North America. People actually use this as a transportation route. And there you see right there on the Hudson River, the water's edge. And then who knew another industrial property? This railroad that went through the west side of Manhattan would now become one of the most Instagram parks in the world. This is the High Line, once again restored, healed, and given back to the public. And then not far where I lived in Brooklyn, Brooklyn Bridge Park. This was a shipping yard. And now you can experience, another greenway is right nearby, experience the water. Growing up, I had no idea this existed. Now they're actually kayaking in the East River. All of this was industrial land that was healed and given back to the public. And what I love about New York City, what they did is that they gave the best land, not to developers, they gave the best land to the public to enjoy. But we're facing these emerging challenges. And what I like about our profession is that we're always adapting and pivoting to address the issues of our time. We're now dealing with public health crisis, and racial and social justice, and divisive politics, and the post-COVID behavior. No one quite knows what's going to happen, but we do know there will be a fallout, a mental fallout of what we experienced the past 2 years. We've all seen this across the country, the disruption we've seen by some of the incidents that have happened. Wildfires out west. This is a picture of Falls River in Raleigh back in 2008. There are some places that don't have enough water, and then there are other places that have too much water. We're seeing all these disruptions right before our very eyes, and it creates a lot of anxiety depending on where you live. But the question is, what can parks do? What role can they play in addressing some of these disruptions? And the answer is they can. In my opinion, parks are not just green spaces, but these are public spaces for people. I'll focus on how these beautiful green assets can help people. They're not just an amenity, but now they're a vital part of the city's infrastructure. When I was commissioner, we made sure that every park asset served multiple purposes. We wanted to make sure there was stormwater collection. They weren't just green spaces, because I had to compete with the fire department and the police department. And we had to emphasize it wasn't just about the cost, but it was about the value. The value that parks and greenways offer us also needs to be underscored. For us, it was a first line against climate change. New York City is a coastal city. We saw the flooding and the storm surges firsthand. And so we started to build it differently. And in New York City, 525 miles were coast, 525 miles, and 155 miles of that distance were parks. And so we started thinking differently. And of course, COVID has shown us, but we do this before, it's not just for our physical health, but it's also for our mental well-being. So we sought out to really focus on a strategic direction for the city about what's next. As was stated, we had 5 strategic priorities. I'll just talk about 2: equity, access, inclusion, and planning and placemaking. I was a planner by training, wanted to come to the Parks Department and look at the system very differently. I remember when the mayor first reached out to me and said, I would like you to consider being the Parks Commissioner. And I said, no. And he said, why? I said, because Parks is 80% operations and 20% planning. I'm a planner. And he said, that's why I want you. I want you to rethink the park system in the 21st century. And so these were the 5 strategic priorities that I came up with and we were able to execute. Now, I'm going to go through these one by one, but again, I know this is New York City, but I want you to pay attention to the principles. The word equity, that is being so used and overused today. And I want to give you the perspective from my opinion, because I've been dealing with the space of diversity, equity, inclusion for well over 30 years. Now it's being talked about more and more. But most people don't really understand what that word means. And to me, there's a simple definition. It means fairness. This is something we can explain to people. When we say it's not equitable, what they're really saying is it's not fair, whether you're 8 or 80. That person has access to greenways. I do not. That community is getting funding. My community is not. Equity is something you can measure by determining fairness. And once people start misusing the word equity, health equity, gender equity, fairness is going to remain. And so that to me is an important measure. And so of how you look at your trail system and park system. So I was charged with coming up with a plan to deal with equity. The mayor gave me 6 months, and within 6 months, we came up with what was called the framework for an equitable future. But we had to figure out how to measure it. What we did not do is poll elected officials and poll the community members. We decided to take a data-driven approach. The first thing we had to do is New York spent an enormous amount of money over 20 years, close to $6 billion to improve our park system. We acquired more acreage and came up with this walk score. New York's a dense city. For us, parks are your front yard, your backyard, your outdoor living room. But 81.5% of New Yorkers had a 10-minute walk to a park. That was our metric. When I became commissioner, I wanted to apply fairness. Yes, I can walk to that park, but there are some parks, and I'll show you, that I wouldn't let my child or grandchild step foot in that public space. So be careful of metrics, because sometimes if you don't ask the right question, you won't get the answer you're looking for, or you won't be able to identify the problem. So we took this data-driven approach, didn't ask anybody, and just looked at the capital investment. Over the past 20 years, when New York City spent close to $6 billion, and that's multiple mayors and multiple councils, how many parks saw little to no investment? And it turned out there were 215. Most of them located in underserved communities. I went to the mayor and said, this is not fair. He agreed, and he put a huge amount of funding to address this unfairness. Rather than using the word equity, unfairness. So we were able to, had a plan to recreate 67 of the 215 as phase 1. Before I left as commissioner, the mayor went ahead and funded another 70. And so it wasn't just a replacement income. This was a total transformation. And we used 21st century technology to really create world-class public spaces. So here is one of those wonderful parks in New York City from Robert Moses. Isn't it fun? All the asphalt. I dare you to find a blade of grass. There are lines to play baseball, but this qualified as your walk to the park. And my question is it a park or a parking lot? That's why I'm saying be careful when you use metrics. Proximity, yes, you can walk to it, but to me, this is not a space that I would want my children or family to thrive. Now, this one's a little bit better because there are 2 trees and a bench, so I suppose you can go there and have a picnic, maybe propose to someone. Once again, this is within a 10-minute walk. And so this is what saddened me, that we knew it wasn't fair. It's been like this for decades. You'll see some that are even worse. So what we decided to do was come up with a whole new design principle. Since we're rebuilding 67 parks, have spray features, water features. They could be play units in the wintertime. They could be activated in the summertime. If you can't get to the pool or beach, you have a neighborhood place you can cool off. For our seniors, we had adult fitness equipment so they can get healthy right in their neighborhood. Get away from those drab gray colors and use these spaces that are colorful and activated to draw people in. I cannot begin to tell you the number one thing the community told us is break up the asphalt and make these spaces green. And we did that. Not only did we green up these spaces, we also included stormwater capture. So once I said before that we wanted to make sure that parks serve multiple purposes, and we planted lots more trees. It absorbed carbon dioxide, it cooled the city, it was for water quality, air quality. And so again, we started talking about all the ecosystem benefits that our parks provided, and we were able to make that case. And then seating. We quadrupled the number of seating in our parks because we wanted our seniors to have a place to sit. They tend to sit at the edge. We have cutouts for handicap, and we want these to be experiences that people can enjoy. And so you'll see in all our new designs, we want people to enjoy these public spaces, to sit, a stroller, a wheelchair, whatever it is, make these places encouraging for people to come out and enjoy themselves in a green space. So I'm going to show an example of one of these transformations that were completed. This was in the South Bronx. It's right next to a community college. As you can see, the entrance is very foreboding. It doesn't look safe or attractive. Now, this park, unlike the other ones, had vegetation. Unfortunately, it looked like this. As a commissioner, I was embarrassed. When I told you I did not want to let my child or grandchild step foot in these parks, that's what I was talking about. How could that have remained that way for so long? It just wasn't fair. And so we knew we had to do something. Because it was close to community college, we had this nice green square where students can come, study, make connections. There are ping pong tables, it's multi-generational. We have places for the seniors to sit, lots of seating. And this is what it looked like in the rendering. There's a community college in the background. And I'm pleased to say it opened up during COVID. I moved from New York City, but I can't wait to go back and see the students now enjoying this space. Before, they didn't even know it existed. And now they have a quality space that they can go there and enjoy. This is another one that was really dominated by people drinking, they call them nips from blue bottles. When we close off the park, we're able to move out the bad activity. On opening day, there was a line wrapped around the block because people said, because of what was happening inside, there was a park on paper, but there wasn't a park they could experience. And we transformed this space. And I remember this grandmother came to me in Spanish and said, muchas gracias. And she told me that she could not go away to take her children, that this was their staycation, so to speak. And I'll never forget that day when I looked at that little girl on this hot July day, just see how she's being refreshed. And this did not exist in her neighborhood. And now this is something that she can enjoy. The next slide I'm going to share with you is one that I often get very emotional. It was another playground, a park we opened up in Brooklyn. We have this big celebration, opening day, ribbon cutting. This little boy, 8 years old, Hispanic, would not go into the park. He wouldn't go in. So I asked one of my staff members to speak to him to find out why wouldn't he come in? I mean, this is a celebration. And the little boy said he's 8 years old, Hispanic, that he didn't want to come in because he didn't know how much it cost. It was that nice, he thought he had to pay. That is the park, and there's no board. This was an asphalt playground. He had not seen anything like this in his neighborhood. And he thought that was so nice, he had to pay. We told him it was free. He ran in, started running around the track. And I can tell you, by focusing on being fair, that boy and all the children in that neighborhood, and families for that matter, are going to live very different lives. By having the lens of fairness and understand that every community, every person deserves a quality public space. We then looked at our pools right near our public housing. They were just horrible looking. And I felt it was time for us to do something about it. The numbers were low. We felt it wasn't fair. We had to do something. And we were able to, just thinking differently, and not a lot of money, under $100,000 per pool, with a lot of now that came from in-kind contributions from paint and furniture. It went from a very unhospitable place now to people call it the resort. And here's an example of what it looks like. We even painted Mark Polo on the perimeter, and now usership has increased by over 50% by adding dignity to these public spaces for a low cost, because we want to be more fair and to pay attention to communities of need. So the bottom line, we completed, before I left, about 62 of these 67 transformations. We created volunteer friends group. There's been no vandalism in any of these spaces, because now we have community partners that are watching these spaces. And as I stated, across the board, usership increased by 50%. I'm now going to shift gears into access, since to me that's critically important, to be free of physical, cultural, financial, and legal barriers, which are called the rules and regulations. Because I believe people may eat and sleep in their homes, but they live in the public realm. They live outdoors. That's where those connections and experiences happen. And so I believe that previous generations were consumers of goods. We love to buy stuff. But the younger generations are consumers of experiences. So whether I was playing director or commissioner of parks, I challenged my staff to not just be designers and planners, but experience builders. How do we create that great experience on a trail, on a greenway, in a green space, in a park? That's so important. If you're going to put a bench there, what's its purpose? What is the experience, rather than just putting it there because it's there? And so we started looking in New York City at the public space. You're looking at a street. That was a street. It was underperforming concrete. And we could not buy more parkland, so we looked to our street, buy some chairs, some flower pots with trees. We're able to create a great experience. And so I took a step back and said, wait a minute, New York City, streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, all of that, 14% of New York City consisted of parks, but 26% were streets and sidewalks. So our goal was to start to reimagine the public realm and start to make it more pleasing, provide that experience for the people in our city. And so I started to, Frederick Olmsted said something amazing. He designed Central Park, that the sidewalk adjacent to the park should be considered the outer park. So when people saw a sidewalk, I saw an outer park. And I also took a laser focus on these perimeter fences. New York City loves them, because there's a dog, he just wants to smell some grass, but he can't. That person has to walk around the block to find the entrance. So why are we gating open space? Open space should be open, not gating. And so I took a laser focus, because here's another example. I thought maybe staff thought the trees were going to run away at night, so they put a fence around it. The trees didn't run away, but we had this tendency of caging up our public spaces, which limited access, both visual and physical access. And then I had this recommendation, let's make open space open and take the fences down. And people said, you can't do it. You're going to make our spaces less safe. And I said, really? Look down the block and can you tell me what's going on inside that park? You can't. So the fences actually weren't making us safe. They were actually making us more unsafe. And here's one of our pools where kids can go and have a summer lunch and enjoy themselves before they jump back in the pool. But it didn't look like this. It didn't look like this. What message were we sending our children? We had to put them in prison just to have lunch. Because of the Cool Pools initiative, we cut the fences down, then liven the spaces. But again, understanding access is so important to remove those barriers, and to me, it just makes a better place. That gave birth to this program called Parks Without Borders, which is now still going on. The mayor gave me some money for a pilot program. Please don't look at the numbers. New York City has to drop in a bucket for us. but look at the program itself about how impactful it was. It was simple. It was a design approach to look at the edges, the entrances, and the adjacent park spaces to reimagine how they can better integrate to the overall open space system. For entrances, take down the fences so people feel naturally gravitated toward the green space. They don't have these barriers that block them from seeing the green space. Lower the fences. For women and seniors in particular, seeing your sightlines makes you feel much more safer. And so we started to lower the fences, and since the sidewalk is the outer part, we started putting street furniture on the sidewalk because parks close, but sidewalks never close. And I can't even tell you, even the police department thanked us for taking on this approach. And then we had these spaces, we just put fences around, let's open them up, particularly their community centers, so people can enjoy the open space. So I'm going to show an example of what this looked like. This one is so successful. The new mayor just went there, and now we have a 5-point plan on how to replicate this in more places. We applied this approach and took a park, a street, and a schoolyard and merged them all together to create 3 acres of open space. Once again, your Robert Moses typical playground, tall 50-foot fence, this man with his dog, once again, no grass to smell. Take note of where those trees are located, because now you're going to see the transformation of what was the old part to the outer part of the new sidewalk. This is what we decided to put in this place. It is now a wonderful experience for people to use. We took down the fence, we put a mound. You see where the trees are located now? We brought the experience out, and now there are tree wells around the trees with benches in between, set up more like a living room, because not all benches should be side by side. It should be conversational, like your living room, about where you have a conversation. No one puts all the chairs against the wall and expect you to have a conversation. So we rethought how we even designed the experience on the sidewalk. There's that street that was used, not very attractive. We converted it now, so festivals and markets and events take place here, and here's a finished product. This is a hot summer night. The park is closed, but the sidewalk isn't closed. And look at the conversation occurring. People of all ages enjoying the beauty of the canopy of the tree, just by reimagining and thinking differently about access could unleash so many great ideas. I mentioned greenways. I went to Minneapolis and did a bike ride of 25 miles, came back to New York, and I was jealous. We had greenways, we're looking at Eastern Parkway, and we decided to put laser focus like other places. It's an urban context, and we felt we needed greenways as well. So the mayor announced that he wanted to build a greenway around the entire island of Manhattan, 32 miles. My focus was to look at the outer boroughs. And just as the case here in North Carolina and South Carolina, destination thoroughfare, make sure we provide access to nature, connect neighborhoods safely, and promote physical activity. So before I left, we set in place 4 new connected greenways. They're now being studied and hopefully will be built soon. One is Bike to the Beach, if you know Coney Island, the Queen's Necklace, tying together all the parks in Queens, Ride to the River, that's the one in the Bronx, and then Ferry to the Levee. We're building a levee because we had a storm. And so these are the ones that are underway. This is the one, the Bike to the Beach. This is what it looks like in Coney Island. Like I said, we had a greenway. Not like down here, we have tree cover. Doesn't look very pretty and not well used. And so our hope is to reimagine it to be a destination and have places where kids can play. So it's not just walking, there'll be nodes for interaction. So this is now being studied, and hopefully more to come. We'll see if the new mayor will be able to execute this plan. So I'm going to close on this section about inclusion. Now, when I say inclusion, because that's a word also used a lot, I mean to be included for all people in the design process, for all people in engagement. Avoid designing exclusive places, but to me, the telltale sign about creating a sense of belonging, as someone can say, being in that greenway or that park, I feel welcome here, I belong here. So let me give you an example. Loitering. I understand the word for private property, but on public property, New York City literally had a sign, you see it right there at the top, that said you could not loiter in our public space. Now, the word loitering means to stand or wait around idly with no apparent purpose. Newsflash, that's what you do in a park. but that rule can be weaponized. If you're a couple that doesn't seem intimidating, sit there, have a good time. If you're a bunch of teenagers that are in there sitting on a bench, you're loitering. And so we knew that that was a problem for us. And so in 2017, we removed loitering as a rule in our public spaces as part of the Criminal Justice Reform Act, because young people were being targeted. So we just changed the rule, and then let me just go back for a second. We launched this program, the Yes Loitering Project, and this is to really work with teens and investigate how they're targeted in our public spaces. Because at Parks for All, we wanted to make sure teens were included in all, and that's not always the case. And then in New York City, we had this crazy sign, no adults except the company of a child, which meant that not every park was open to everyone. You know, we had seniors getting summonses and told they couldn't come in the park. And so I didn't like that. I felt it wasn't fair. And we changed and re-signed the rules to put the sign by play spaces, not the entire park. That one rule change for a sign increased park access by 50% citywide. And just by having that lens of understanding inclusion to be included, to me, I want to make sure people understand putting this diversity, equity, inclusion in action, and not this concept that someone has an mission statement. But what does it look like when you actually operationalize? I'm going to stop end on the reflections on disruption where I start. As I stated, it was very troubling for the past couple of years with all these disruptions. But what I've realized that I hit a low point, our Parks Department hit a low point in the summer of 2020. And we were essential workers, and I saw staff just suffering mentally of the anguish of coming to work every day. I was suffering. And so I decided to reach out to the Department of Mental Health, and they held a session on stress and anxiety. And what they said was, you know, stress sometimes can be good, but prolonged stress is not healthy. And she shared with us the physical, the emotional, the behavioral, the cognitive, the spiritual impact of this long-term stress of all these disruptors, including being sheltered in place. And if you look at them, we soon realize this is what our park goers were going through. This is what our trail goers were going through. Our staff, our family, and in some cases, ourselves. And so we knew that we had to figure out how do we find a way of turning the corner of helping our citizens through our parks, trails, and open space. We're so grateful we found out about the Trauma Stewardship Institute, didn't even know it existed. And they started sharing with us about going outside, being active, admiring art. And so we realized as a parks department, let us play a role in helping to heal the community from what they were going through with COVID and all the other disruptors we're experiencing in 2020 and 2021. And Mark said it. He said something about that park trails were good for the soul. I agree, Mark. Parks and greenways became our sanctuaries of sanity because they have the power to heal and to bring joy. And that's something we start to lean into. In fact, I went a step further. You're looking at Prospect Park, my favorite park on the planet, that parks should be considered, and greenways, as part of our healthcare system. Flat out. In fact, this is not new. During the last pandemic, you saw this explosion of green space. I don't know if you know this, but Olmsted, his son died of cholera. And I think that must have been a motivating factor to create all these green spaces, and Eastern Parkway, which was another greenway, one of the first. And so to me, I think that moment is upon us once again. And as Chris was saying, I'm hoping it will help get more and more of these bonds approved. And he is right. The majority of bonds that are put out there for open space typically pass. And so now I'm delighted to work for a firm. We're now focused on expanding green space, expanding trailways. A lot of these you recognize in your community. This one's in Cary. This one also was in Cary. This one is in Durham. That I'm now privileged that I could play that role in healing communities and providing that healthcare system that so many of us need. I also want to talk about another approach we took is to think about the naming of spaces. We knew a lot of people were suffering, and so we took this one space in Brooklyn, we named it Juneteenth Grove. I have to tell you, the day that we celebrated Juneteenth, it became a federal holiday. There was so much joy in this space. But this space was designed for reflection, for healing, for celebration. Staff went out there and painted the benches themselves. Here's one of our staff members. We planted 19 rosebud bushes. That is a tree I planted and had the privilege to pray for that tree, for both, not just the tree, but our ancestors and those that will follow, that they'll be blessed about this public space and understand that we have to reflect the experiences of all people in these public spaces. I went on to rename about another 28 spaces to really reflect the diversity experience of New York City. So that was a privilege of mine. So I want to end on this one, that we wanted to change our role and use our parks very differently. I knew people couldn't hug a person during COVID, but you could hug a tree. So we created about 2,000 of these signs and put them on trees all across the city, because I believe the tree is the original healthcare worker. So if we see a tree, it's okay to give a tree a hug. So in conclusion, we really were focused on creating an equitable and inclusive park system and public spaces and greenways that are accessible to all, and has the power to heal, but also bring joy. Thank you all very much. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Mitchell, that was so inspiring. We already have plenty of comments in the chat box about how inspired people feel after hearing all of that. I have a question about you all using data to find the fairness and seeing that you had 200 something parks that were not invested in a certain amount of time. Is there any other data that people can look at to investigate fairness besides investment?
We look at conditions. So we look at maintenance records. So you can also look at your maintenance records. We were very blessed in New York City where we had auditors that would go out twice a year and they would inspect the park for issues that need to be addressed. Certain things could be handled by staff. Other things kind of rolled into a capital project. But that gave us very good intelligence about the quality of park and what was needed. What were the cutting cycles? So we had these standards to make sure that we're maintaining all of our parks the same. We also want to make sure access to the amenities was evenly distributed. So you can look at your park amenities, you can look at the park program, you look at your fees, because in many cases fees could be a barrier to entry. And so all those things are something that we look at, but we also look at the capital plan, the investment, to make sure as it's planned, you can always go back years and years and look at the capital plan to make sure that you're fair on how you invest those dollars. So condition, programming, maintenance, and capital are some of the other data points that you can look at to see if they're being fair. And also the programs inside. Like, for example, there's some communities that they wanted to have, let's say, basketball and they want places to eat. People say, no, we don't want that. You want to make sure you have the amenities that are specific to the community's needs. And very often that is not the case. I took out some slides because I knew mine was too long about certain places where people refuse to allow food to be placed or these places to barbecue because they felt it would be too disruptive. They didn't want to attract a certain element. But food to certain communities is how they come together. They come together, eat, celebrate, and have family gatherings. And so to me, those are some of the things we look at, the programming and the rules. The rules. I could do a whole session on rules. Those are the life safety, and then those that are value added based on personal behavior, very subjective. So always do a deep dive on the rules, how people must behave in public space.
Let's open the floor up to some questions. If anyone has a question for Mitchell, you can unmute and ask yourself. I know we're getting up to our time at 11:30. This has been such a great presentation, Mitchell. Thank you so much. But please unmute and ask a question if you have one.
While people are getting their questions together, one other question I have, Mitchell, is a lot of the numbers you were showing are like intimidating to us that we are working with less resources. Are there particular strategies for improving parks at a low cost that were effective for you all?
Yeah, well, we really lean into volunteers. I can't begin to tell you how important that was. Number one, they came with an attitude of caring. Our tree planters were our volunteers. Flowers, playing balls, beautification, our volunteers. The program, we had partners where we didn't have to, the burden of the program wasn't on us. We just worked out a situation where they would do the public shows, they would do the readings, they would do the cultural festivals. And we just worked on the liability because that came with it as well. So do not underestimate the power of volunteers. Not all of it has to be done by county or town staff. It can be done by volunteers. And kids love to rake leaves. And so it is a great way of engaging local groups that can help you maintain property. So that's one way. The other one is that I said it earlier, that when I was a parks commissioner, and even when I was in other towns, you're competing against other departments. And I think people look at parks and trailways as nice amenities and don't realize how vital it is to the mental health and public health. And so I reposition, don't just look at the cost, but look at the value. And parks and trailways were unsung heroes during the pandemic. Don't forget it now that we're now rolling out of it. And so I do emphasize that. But I think volunteers is probably the easiest one. There are some others I'm researching about concessions that I think is an untapped resource in North Carolina, where you can have partners that can help build things for you, and then you split revenue. So I think revenue sharing and concessions is an untapped opportunity in North Carolina. It's something I'm doing more research about. It's on the books, but I don't think anyone has really dipped their toes. In New York City, we had concessions over 400, generated tens of millions of dollars in revenue that went back to the funds. I just don't know if that's legal or permitted in North Carolina. So I'm researching, so we'll have to come back for a session on that.
Anyone want to jump off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, while they're doing it, my hope is as I work with McAdams, I'll start giving up some more local examples. I always know New York City is quite intimidating, large budget. But the one thing I do want to leave people with is that, equity versus inclusion is not something to do, it's really who you are. And as you begin to understand the importance of the examples of how it's applied, I showed you examples of New York, but if you look with a different lens, you'd be surprised what you're able to uncover. Rules, barriers. I showed you a couple. You want to remove them. Make sure everyone feels welcome in a public space. And so I think it's kind of an audit. You need to take a step back and look, but apply those lenses as you do your work. And that's where you can say, if parks are for all, trails are for all, you want to make sure you live up to that expectation.
Well, thank you again, Mitchell. This has just been an incredible morning. So much inspiration, so much we've learned to apply to our local areas. Excuse me. So thank you again for spending your morning with us. And just to wrap up our morning, we have one more week. So next week, again, we're going to be looking at 2 case studies. Here in North Carolina is one, and then also in Philadelphia. So I invite you to join us again next week. And then our field trips have been a lot of fun. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to end up on this one. Hang on, let me just move forward here. Sorry, y'all. Never mind, I'm gonna go back. I'm sorry, here we go, hold on.
That other thing worked well enough.
There, I'm just going to leave it on this. So our field trips have been a lot of fun. Even if you haven't been able to join us, I do encourage you to check these out. The Haw River Headwaters Trail in Oak Ridge. We had a fantastic time on Winston-Salem Greenways. That is a destination quality system of greenways. Encourage you to go over there and ride your bikes around and hit some of the redevelopment. We have our own High Line in the Triad in Winston-Salem with the Long Branch Trail. It's a really, really wonderful place. But today we're going to be up near Hanging Rock. We're going to get a sneak peek at Babe Meekum, the new addition of the historic hotel from 1904. That's going to be part of Hanging Rock State Park. They're going to be doing some major renovations there, and we're going to jump across the street to look at some mountain bike trails that are again part of Hanging Rock at Moore Springs. And then next week, weather permitting, and so far the weather looks good, we'll be on the river in Madison and Rockingham County, looking at a newly designed river park with a fun little kayak play area and then a 3-mile trip on the river. So there is an extra cost to rent a kayak, but you can also bring your own. and get pay for transportation for that. So look at our website for those opportunities. We hope to see y'all this afternoon up in this Hanging Rock State Park. And thanks again for joining with us. And again, acknowledge our sponsors, McAdams, Alta, Destination by Design, the local government federal credit union, and the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association. We will stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any further comments or conversations you want to do. But thanks again for coming.